There's a point in every painting where you realize detail isn't the answer, where adding more actually makes things worse. And that's usually where most painters start to struggle, because the real challenge isn't how much you can paint, it's how much you can leave out. And no one understood that better than Rembrandt van Rijn. I'm Jacinto September, and in this video I'm going to create a painting inspired by Rembrandt's later work. Not by copying what he did, but by trying to understand how he thought while he was painting. Before I get into the actual painting and the analysis, I want to quickly lay out the tools I'm going to be using. Because I think with Rembrandt, the tools actually matter more than people often think. I've set up a simple palette here. It's a very limited earth-based palette: white, yellow ochre, cadmium red, lamp black, raw umber, burnt umber, and Van Dyke brown. And this kind of palette is very close to what Rembrandt himself often worked with, especially in his later paintings. A lot of earth pigments and a lot of muted warmth. And we'll talk more about his color choices and why he may have leaned into that kind of palette later in the video, because there's actually a lot of depth to that decision. Underneath the palette, I've also laid out the brushes I'll be using, and I've kept it very simple on purpose. I've numbered them so it's easy to follow along. Number 1 is the soft brush. This is what I'll be using for the drawing stage, and it allows me to block in structure without getting too distracted by detail. Number 2 is the hairy 2 brush. This will be used during the blocking stage. It has a bit more texture and resistance, which helps me stay loose and think in broader value relationships. Number 3 is the bristle round. This is what I'll use for the modeling stage. And this is where I start to build form, turn the light, and bring in more structure. Number 4 is the bristle flat number 2. This one is for the ground layer. It lets me lay in that initial dark foundation with a bit of natural variation and texture. And lastly, number 5 is the standard hairy brush. And this is mainly for impasto and texture during the later modeling stage, especially when I want to bring in certain lights forward or add that physical surface quality you often see in Rembrandt's work. And again, I've kept everything very minimal here, because when you look at Rembrandt's process, especially later on in his career, it becomes very clear that he wasn't relying on a wide range of tools. He was relying on control over a small set of tools, and that's something I want to carry through this entire painting. Before getting into the painting, I spent a bit of time inside Rebelle looking at one of his self-portraits, specifically the one where he paints himself as the Apostle Paul. And instead of over-analyzing it, I just pulled out a few key ideas that stood out to me, things I want to stay aware of while I paint. Things like the separation of light and dark, the contrast between thick paint and thin paint, the atmosphere around the head, and the importance of tonal values holding everything together. And these are just a few anchors. I'm not going to break these down right now. They'll come up naturally as the painting develops. So let's get into it. Alright, so I'm starting with the dark ground. And this decision already puts us closer to how Rembrandt was thinking in his later work. He wasn't approaching painting from a clean, bright surface where everything has to be constructed from scratch. He was thinking from a foundation of darkness, often warm, earthy, absorbent grounds, and then building light out of that. And that shift is important because it changes the entire logic of painting. You're no longer adding shadows to a light surface. You're carving light out of something already deep and unified. And Rembrandt wasn't doing this randomly. In the 17th century Dutch workshop tradition, grounds were often carefully prepared, warm brown, umber-based surfaces that already carried tonal harmony. And that earth-based foundation wasn't just technical, it was emotional. There's also something very physical about the materials Rembrandt used. He often worked with a very limited but extremely sensitive palette. Earth-based pigments like ochres, umbers, raw and burnt sienna, etc. And then of course, strategically placed highlights built with lead white. And lead white is actually one of the most important materials in his entire painting process, because it's not just a white pigment, it has body, it has opacity, it physically sits on top of the surface. And in Rembrandt's late paintings, that matters extremely. Because those thick, light passages, especially in the face, in the forehead, in the nose, or the cheekbones, they're not just color decisions, they are material decisions. You can almost imagine him thinking less in terms of color mixing and more in terms of material contrast, the plasticity of paint. Thick against thin, opaque against transparent, light sitting on top of shadow. And that's where artists like John Singer Sargent later pick up from him. Sargent in particular studies that economy of paint, the idea that a single loaded stroke of light can describe more than 10 carefully blended ones. And even earlier than that, painters like Anders Zorn pushed that earth palette thinking even further. Zorn famously reduced everything down to a very limited set of pigments, almost like a modern echo of Rembrandt's restraint. And then you have someone like Vincent van Gogh, who takes Rembrandt's emotional intensity, not his realism, but that sense of inner light and darkness, and pushes it into something completely different. But the root is still there. It always comes back to Rembrandt's way of thinking about value first. So even now, as I'm working into this dark ground, I'm already thinking in those terms. Not color first, not detail, but light emerging from structure. Now I've moved into the drawing stage, using the soft brush. But again, this isn't drawing in the traditional sense. This is mass placement, shadow organization. And this is something Rembrandt constantly does across his entire career. Even in his etchings, he's never really chasing contour as the primary driver of form. He's thinking in volumes of light and shadow interaction. There's a kind of sculptural mindset here, as if the face is being carved out of darkness rather than drawn onto a surface. And I think this connects to how he studied in his early years as well. He was heavily influenced by classical chiaroscuro traditions, but also by direct observation, constantly studying people in natural light. And that combination, structure plus observation, is what gives his work that grounded realism. At this stage, I'm not thinking about likeness yet. I'm thinking about weight, where the head sits, where it turns, where it disappears into shadow. And if those relationships are correct, the likeness almost takes care of itself later. Now I'm starting to move into the blocking stage of the painting, using the hairy number 2 brush. And this is where the painting starts to organize itself into a clearer value system. But even here, Rembrandt's approach isn't about precision, it's about hierarchy. He's constantly asking, what is the most important here? What should the viewer see first? What should disappear? And this is where his understanding of light becomes really strategic, because light in his paintings is never evenly distributed. It's selective, almost editorial. And this is also where lead white becomes critical again, because in the lights, especially in the face, he often uses thicker, more physical applications of paint. It's not just lighter values, it's material emphasis. The light literally sits on top of everything else, and that physicality is something you can really feel in his later self-portraits. They're not smooth, they're not polished in a traditional academic sense. They feel built, constructed, almost like the painting is still in the process of becoming. And I think that's part of what makes them so modern. Rembrandt was an impressionist before the era of impressionism. Now I've moved deeper into the modeling stage. And this is where everything starts to merge: structure, light, atmosphere. But even here, Rembrandt isn't chasing surface realism, he's chasing presence. Light becomes less about describing form perfectly and more about revealing it selectively. And what's interesting is how often he lets things fall apart. Edges dissolve, forms merge into shadow, details disappear completely, and yet the painting still feels complete. That's the paradox of his late work. It's less information, but more presence. And this is where artists like Sargent really pick up his influence again, because they start to realize that refinement doesn't always mean adding more. It often means removing everything that isn't necessary. And even Zorn's work, especially his portraits, carries that same economy: limited palette, controlled values, strong separation of light and dark. So in a way, you can trace a direct line from Rembrandt's late paintings through Sargent's brushwork, through Zorn's simplicity, all the way into modern observational painting. And as I continue working into this, I'm constantly thinking less about rendering and more about relationships. How does this light sit against that shadow? Does this edge need to exist, or can it dissolve? And that idea of selective information is really at the core of Rembrandt's thinking. He wasn't afraid of ambiguity. In fact, he used it deliberately. And that's something I think a lot of painters struggle with today, especially digitally. The instinct is often to define everything, but Rembrandt does the opposite. He allows areas to remain unresolved, because that unresolved space is what creates atmosphere. And working inside Rebelle actually helps reinforce that mindset, because with systems like nanopixel rendering and the Real Shader engine, you're constantly dealing with subtle variation in paint behavior. It discourages over-polishing, it encourages response. And that feels closer to traditional painting than a lot of modern digital workflows. I think this is something Rembrandt teaches more than anything. Not how to paint more, but how to paint less, but with intention. This isn't about copying his work. It's about understanding the mindset behind it. Starting from darkness, building through relationships, and allowing the painting to emerge on its own terms. And if you want to explore that kind of process digitally, working inside Rebelle is one of the closest ways to experience that traditional way of thinking. That's it from me. Thanks for watching.